Shabbat Shalom, dear community family. This week we begin a very important segment in Jewish life, a period of time that's called the months of special joy, the month of increased happiness, the month of extraordinary good fortune, mazal. In fact, it is during the coming 2 months, leap months, the months of Adar, where the Torah tells us, when Adar arrives, we increase in our joyfulness, happiness, breakthrough happiness. Whereas during this month, the Jewish people faced one of the most calamitous moments of their entire history. Unfortunately, facing absolute, complete genocide at the hands of Haman, who commanded that every single Jew in all of the civilized world in 127 lands were to be exterminated on a single day. It was a time of great danger for the Jewish people. They sought every means, diplomatic means, going to the palace means, fasting, praying, studying, tried to do everything they could in order to avert that horrific decree that we talk about in terms of the miracle of Purim, where absolute destruction and desolation and annihilation transformed to joy, jubilation, happiness, and a sense of eternal invincibility. In fact, opened the door for the rebuilding of the Second Temple. At that moment, you ask yourself the question, that same month, the Jews were in a sense of deep mourning. They were facing existential disappearance, unfortunately. The entire Jewish world. They were praying, Mordechai beseeching God, Esther putting her life on the line to see if she could evoke some mysterious response from the king that would nullify this decree. Deep sorrow, deep pain, introspection, connection to God, thoughtfulness. There was no joy during that first half of the month. And then transformation. In one single moment, the entire sadness left them and they turned into the jubilance that we now celebrate as the happiest day of the year on Purim. And if you think about it, what brought that about? The entire process. Why is it called Purim? Because Purim means lottery. It was not some strategic, thought-through plan in either direction. The hate that was initiated by Haman was, as we talked about, the hate that we can feel today in various quarters, visceral. It was transcendent of logic. There was no rationality to it. It was a hate that permeated the essence of the person from the time they were babies until the time that they became jihads. That was the feeling. Every single one, a hate, was not rational. In fact, it was so irrational that Haman's strategy was a lottery. His strategy was, let's pick a day that we're going to have a party, the easiest day, the day Jews may be fasting. No, a lottery. And we call it by that name because Jewish life is not logic. It's not systemic. There is a way in which we access the opportunities to integrate ourselves into that opportunity to live that Jewish life. It's just not available without your actions, without your behavior, without channeling that power through a refined environment that can handle it, because it comes directly through a power that's beyond our logic. Because just like the hate is beyond logic, the power that we have is beyond logic, because only something that's beyond rationality can equate and neutralize and overcome a hate that's without rationality. So as we go into the Shabbat, and we're facing a world that makes zero sense whatsoever, it's the only concept that I can imagine. And you read about stories and countries and democracies. The only time when you say to a country, you cannot secure yourself. You cannot protect yourself. Yes, they're murderers and they say they're going to murder you, and they are serial murderers, and they'll do it once and again and the third time and the fifth time. They've done it before, and there's no way that you can trust them. But instead of leaving them in your front yard, they'll move into your backyard. Would you allow that to happen? Never. And we Jews are demanded to make that happen. And the world is screaming at us. My wife and some other shluchas are in Israel with 22 women on a 4-day mission of support. It's called survival mission, supporting mission. And they're visiting the families in the various towns whose husbands are on the front lines, visiting those who lost somebody, unfortunately, visiting those who are lonely, who have to raise their children without any help in their homes. The feeling in that country is one of deep connection, of deep family, of deep brotherhood, of highest level morale, but together with that, a real inside sense of a mourning that's on hold. The country cannot afford to mourn yet, because we're now in a mode of saving our lives. So we don't have time to sit and mourn. We don't have time to cry. Our soldiers don't have time to let loose and do that. Today, they have to be in the forward position of knowing that we will not allow anyone to stand up and hurt any one of our brothers and sisters and children. It's not going to happen in our world. The Jew will not let it happen. God will not let it happen. But together with that, there's an underlying feeling of loss, of depth, of feeling, because the one thing that the Jew cannot take out of himself is his sensitivity, his emotion, his empathy, his feeling. The reason that these women are in Israel, just to be together with their sisters. So as we come from the reading of the Torah last week, from the Revelation last week, to living like a Jew this week, living like a proper Jew in every single way, the Torah tells us right away, you can be a servant under circumstances. Sometimes you have to give up your freedoms. If you stole and you have to pay back the price, you have to give up your freedoms. Sometimes if you're poverty-stricken and you have to support your family, you have to give up certain kind of freedoms. But when those freedoms are achieved after the 6 years of work, don't stay there any longer. If you stay there any longer as a slave, if you give up yourself for any longer than necessary, they bore your ear. A Jew is not a slave. A Jew is not a servant to anyone except to God. And the reason you can be a servant to God, because the servant of the king is like the king. He has the royalty of that environment. So brothers and sisters, we're coming to a time where God will transform the sadness to joyfulness, where we will see an absolute transformation in the world. We will see a messianic reality where people have sanity and know what good is good and what evil must be eradicated. And in that way, we will merit a world that is balanced, that is positive, that is good, that is not filled with conflagration and arguments and discussions, and a whole world that's fragmented, but a world that's complete and whole as Hashem intended us. We started out in the Garden of Eden, and our destination is to transform this world again into the Garden of Eden. Shabbat Shalom.